And the recording is set. Morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Doing well. So, quick introduction with us today is Jonathan Jones, the Director of Health, Safety, and Environment for Highland Companies. For those that aren't familiar with that, more locally, Jonathan deals with all those functions with Western Utilities. So that's quite a title. I guess you get to play with a whole lot of things considering the current situation that we're in.
A lot of my day is, for the past 8 weeks, has been consumed with COVID planning and response and mitigation efforts and all the other fun things I did prior to that too.
Right. So we're here today to talk about damages and some of the ideas or protocols or things that people could put into place initially to mitigate the opportunity for damage. But then if one does occur, not getting into at-fault issues, but just if a damage occurs, what are some of the processes and policies people could put into place to help protect themselves in the scenario of a damage? Even if they're at fault, that doesn't mean they want to have to sign a blank check, so thinking in that frame, obviously the point is to avoid the damage in the first place. So
Sure.
Give us some clues into that right there.
Speaking universally, not about any one company or organization or set of policies or guidance, but just universal good practices, obviously, is you always want to excavate with a dig ticket, a valid dig ticket, and an accurate extent to where you're going to be working is reflected in that dig ticket. So when you go out to do that, pre-marking is extremely important, and it's important for everybody involved in the process. From you as an excavator, it shows you know where you're going to be digging, and for the locators that are going out there to do the locating, it gives them clear guidance on where you anticipate digging. So be sure to pre-mark, use flags and stakes, paint, and then wait your allotted time. And then when you go back to actually do your work, take the time to survey the area, look around and make sure that all the paint on the ground matches what you anticipated being there, and then look for other structures in the area. Look for services leading into buildings or lines coming down off of poles. Look for manhole structures and vaults that might be in the area, and see if there's marks going in and out of those. So visually inspect for unmarked areas or private lines. For example, if you're walking, especially in a suburban area, if you're walking out and looking at a right-of-way job and suddenly you see sprinkler heads, but you don't see purple paint anywhere or blue paint anywhere, that should probably tell you that somebody's got a private sprinkler system out there, and you're going to be running into serious problems with that, more likely than not.
So, right. So
that's definitely something to do.
Right. So I threw a picture up here, and this is, this is not terribly uncommon, but so if you pulled up on this job expecting to go from this transformer in the foreground to one down the road here a little ways, you've got a valid ticket, but this is what you see when you get there. What's your response to this?
Well, it looks like somebody put a brand new green carpet over my paint marks. You can see there's fresh paint by the transformer at the foreground of the photo. So yeah, you're going to have to call in for a remark on that one. I wouldn't call it incomplete or anything like that. Clearly the marks were there, but they've been covered up. So you've got another step to do, and unfortunately it's going to cost you a little time.
Take you some time, right?
Yeah, that's a really good example though that you put up there. And then along the way, to prevent the damages that we talked about, is pre-job photos. Before you actually start working that day, is take some photos of where you're going to be excavating before you start putting a shovel in the ground, before you're potholing, to identify and locate those utilities that are indicated, marked. And then as you go along the way, take job progress photos. And the job progress photos can be part of your work package anyway. It might be to document benchmarks that you're supposed to achieve along the way, or certain gates before you move to the next step, that you put the utility in at a prescribed depth, or that you've packaged bins or 90s in a certain way. And that all can come into play later You know, we're always hoping that the damage doesn't take place, but if it does, that's to your benefit to have that documentation.
Well, and I know in talking in the past years with other excavators and there these pre-excavation photos or videos or whatever the case may be, it's also assisted them in some cases where during the punch in the ticket, you know, at the end of this project, all of a sudden a municipality or somebody, a DOT client would look and say, well, you need to replace that chunk of sidewalk because it's broken, or you know.
Yeah,
So having these photos might also say, you mean this broken sidewalk before we dug, you know, so there's some protection there as well, even beyond the utility side of it. Those
yeah.
photos might be able to protect you in those scenarios as well.
Yeah, 100%. We've had to use that in the past. And one of the great things is photos now are so easy to take because of the phones that people carry. You know, everybody's got a smartphone with a camera in it. And one of the other things that those cameras do for you really well is you've got a video feature in there. You can actually take a video with audio. So you can walk your entire job path, whatever that is, with a video, and you can describe, I'm in front of 123 Main Street, you know, this is pre-existing damage, and you can go all the way through and capture that. And it really does help.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, that's great. You've got your dig ticket, your pre-mark and everything. You take a look, you inspect the job site looking for any clear evidence of something that might not be marked. And of course, if you have that and you think it belongs to a facility owner, you call back to the one call and have them get back out there. The private facilities are always going to be an issue, no matter what. And there, obviously, you have to go either up to the resident or the business to see if there's any way to mitigate that. And that's an ongoing problem nationally. It's not just here in Illinois. So that's something that you know, I don't think any of us have a good answer on the private stuff, but knowing it's there at least helps you mitigate the opportunity for that damage, which is great. So now, unfortunately, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. So something's damaged. Um, you know, so obviously safety is a critical issue, but also there's some legal
Mhm.
requirements. If you recognize that a line's been damaged, can you step us through some of those?
Well, regardless of what type of facility it is, I'm of the belief that if you hit it, you need to be making some phone calls. Um, and you need to take the approach that, you know, clearly we didn't go out there and intentionally damage something. It's an accident, treat it appropriately, but make sure that your contact 811. Try to describe what it is. If you can specifically tell them what you think it is, go ahead and do that. And request that somebody come out and inspect it and determine, you know, what type of damage you're dealing with, or what it is. It might be an abandoned facility. It might be retired in place. But you need to make that phone call. And one of the good things about that is, you know, you can call 811. In this situation, you'll call Julie. And if you don't know what it is, Julie can provide you with the numbers of who we think it might be. Julie will have the numbers for all the people that are going to be there. So with that being said, you know, if it's something incidental, that works out well that way. If you get into something where it's more serious, if it's a gas line or something to that effect, you know, then we need to protect the public, cordon off the area, call 811, call 911 if necessary. Um, and I always had a saying that, you know, if there's anything flowing out of the pipe that you hit, you call 911. I don't care if it's a water damage or if it's a forced sewer main, because when that occurs, now you got a situation where you can be eroding road base, curb gutter, it can create a traffic hazard, and police are going to need to take control of that scene and prevent public injury. You're not going to be able to do it. There's too much going on. If you get into a forced sewer main, it's that same problem and then some, because of the contents of the sewer is a big issue. So make sure that we're doing everything to, you know, protect the public and secure the scene. And then if you can, and when you can, when it's safe, go ahead and start taking some photographs of that area to start your documentation process of what's going on. And that's the first step. Take one or two good close-up photos of the damage if you can. But after that, it's probably all you need, because if it's a damaged pipe or a damaged conduit or a damaged cable, one or two photos is going to be adequate at that. But then what I like to do after that, me personally, is I'll find out which way north is, and I'll orientate myself to face north. with the damage in front of me, and I'll stand back about 5 feet, and I'll take my first photo. And then I'll rotate clockwise 90 degrees, and I'll take my second photo. And then I'll do the same thing 90 degrees one more time to my third photo. Now I'm facing south, and I'll continue that clockwise motion all the way around, taking 4 photos at a minimum. And then once I get back to where I started at, my starting point, I'll step back another 5 to 10 feet and do the process all over again. And then repeat it again, backing up another 5 to 10 feet. And I want to be able to end up at the end of the day with no less than 16 to 20 photos, quality photos of that damaged area. And I want the entire area encompassed in that. I want to see things that are immovable landmarks that I can reference in the photos. So I can show utility poles, fire hydrants, a chip out of the curb and gutter, out of the sidewalk, something that is going to be a permanent fixture that when I go back to look at these photos, I can piece them together using that utility pole with a U-guard coming down the side of it as a reference.
Right.
So I know that all my photos are lined up right. And when I do that, I want to be able to take the area and show every piece of paint on the ground or every flag on the ground. And if I can, if you have it available, a hit kit with a measuring device and damage indicator cone and mark cones are an invaluable investigation tool.
And that's that feeds right into a question I just received. So what type of training do you provide your crews, and do they have hit kits?
Yes, we have hit kits on for all of our crews. I like to say that, and then we do provide damage training, damage prevention training, and response. And response is just as much as the prevention part of it. So it's important to have the tools and equipment together to do it, but it's more important to have the knowledge and the willingness to stand up and do it.
Right.
To know what to do.
So I'm going to share a couple more photos here, kind of referencing what you've been discussing here. Photos are interesting. If we look at this first photo that you see right now, looking at the two, what appears to be their phone or cable drops there, line up pretty closely with that far left orange stripe you see on the ground there. But this exact same area, taken from a different angle, provides a completely different looking scenario. You could argue here it looks like the marks are off, and so that's why these photos and being consistent, the training on always taking the same type of photo at the same angles allows for consistency looking back. I mean, if I'm one of your folks in the field taking these pictures, if I take them the same way each time through protocols or standards, then I could have moved on to another company by the time you end up having to deal with a facility owner on a claims issue or anything like that. And at least looking at them, the progress of the photos and what they're telling you and everything else. So there's some good stuff there. But having said that, this is kind of something that comes up quite a bit too. So what do you consider a damage? What is a damage?
A damage to me personally is anything that happens, any contact whatsoever that disturbs the coating, it dents, scrapes, dings, or severs or damages any part of an underground facility. It can be a lateral coming off of the main. It can be the main itself. And one of the things that people I think underestimate, and I think it's because it's a lack of knowledge, is when they get around gas mains or petroleum facilities and they scrape the coating that's on that main, that's a damage and it needs to be reported. And you're not going to, 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get charged. You're not going to get a bill for it. They're just going to come out and wrap it or repaint it or do whatever they do to protect that integrity of that pipe. But if you don't, and you simply backfill it, and now that pipe remains in service, and if you're working with an acidic soil of any type, now you've got a corrosion problem on that gas main. And it might be 10 years or 15 years or whatever, how many ever years down the road, it causes a rupture in that main. And now you've got a significant release to the environment, potential fire problem. It's just real simple to make that call and let the gas company know that, we scraped your pipe. We're really sorry, but we'd like you to come out and take a look at it.
Right. And that works the same way even on the wire types. My previous
Sure.
life, I was with a large investor-owned electric company, and there was quite often where we would get a report of an outage or something like that. You'd go to look at it, assuming it's just a fault. In other words, the cable's gone bad, and when you finally do chase down the fault, there sits a fence post or there's another utility laying right across the wire, and it's just that the coating was nicked. And it took that long, especially in these northern climates where the earth moves so much because of the freeze thaw each year. And it finally broke the casing all the way through to a conductor, and there you have a short. And so, and it is kind of amazing how good the facility owners are at being able to trace back to find out who actually created that incident in the first place, even if it was a year or two ago. So it behooves you to let people know when you think you've contacted a line and let them take a look at it. So, and obviously, all of this is moot if you're out there working on somebody else's ticket.
Yeah, true.
You need to have your own ticket when you're out there. So, and going back to the beginning of the potholing here, this is something unfortunately we're seeing quite a bit of too. You can see they've exposed facilities close to the surface, but there's other facilities down below, in this case, that were damaged. So what, I'm assuming in your potholing, are you going to the depth of your proposed work to try to avoid these types of scenarios?
Me personally, what I'd like to see done is if you've got to be 32 inches deep or 40 inches deep, I'd like to see you pothole down to the depth of your facility plus an additional 18 inches, depending on what you're doing. If it's just a matter of going down to where you're going to be and you're going to lay in a pipe and keep moving on, that's one thing. But if you're doing some other function like directional drilling or something like that, where you might be pulling back a reamer or sizes may be variable, you should pothole down to the depth of your intended excavation plus the additional 18 inches of tolerance zone to give yourself that window to work through, and you hopefully eliminate the opportunity for damage that way.
Right.
In this situation, it looks like you've got a set of what I would call probably new facilities underneath a set of old facilities. It looks like you got a couple sets of pipes there.
That's correct.
To me, and this is definitely more of an urban type of a scenario, but that torpedo sand should be an indicator. That type of sand that you're dealing with there is typically something that utilities are bedded in or placed in. So if you're digging and you're dealing with that and you're not down to what the previous earth looked like prior to that sand, that might be a good indicator too.
Right. And any issues in this photo?
Oh, gee whiz. I guess the only way I could say it would be to have a conversation with the gentleman that appears to be standing on a 2-inch gas main, and ask him why he thinks that would be a good idea, because he's clearly chosen not to stand on the clay tile sewer beneath him. So why on earth do you think it would be a good idea to stand on a gas main or electrical duct or communications duct? It wasn't designed to support you.
Well,
and especially that gas main, you have no idea what it's made out of. That could be old cast iron.
Right. And that's one of the issues is we've seen this, unfortunately, where the excavation in and of itself never created the damage, but the actions of the crew on site afterwards, while they're in there working, we've seen, a chunk of concrete just trying to be moved out into spoils ends up falling down in the hole. And, the act does require that while that facility is exposed, that you support it, which doesn't mean just holding it up elevation wise. It means support the protection of it and not allow it to fall in the hole. Things happen every day that we don't intend, that's for sure. But this is just looking for a concern problem on the job site. A couple of other shots I wanted to share with you here. If this is what you're seeing and there's no paint anywhere, this is looking two different directions on the same road.
Oh no.
What kind of hint does that give you about your job site?
I'd be really, really concerned. That indicates to me that there's some sort of a pipeway or right of way going through there, and I would look at who owns the property on the other side of that fence and start knocking on their door, or find a security guard or somebody to talk to, because there's a lot of potential for bad things to go on right there.
And again, the act does require, if you see any clear evidence of unmarked facilities. Now, in this scenario, this was years ago, they were not a member. And ironically, because of language in the act, they weren't required to be a member, even though those lines went under a public way. But this is why we ask folks to look around ahead of time. It's a private facility, obviously a little more hazardous than a sprinkler, but it's in your job. You need to pay attention to these things and review those things. So having said that, the act also says you have to call Julie, you have to notify the owner. And one of the advantages of calling Julie is, if you're not sure of the numbers to the owners and you kind of describe the facility type, we can give you those numbers in a lot of cases.
Right.
So that's beneficial. But so you've shut down your equipment, you're waiting, the site is safe, and you've notified the utility. So without asking you to just obliterate facility owners here necessarily, but what's your experience with the utility owners' timeliness, getting out there and working with you to get you back on the job, get you working?
Oh, after damage takes place?
Yes.
It really depends on, I think it's anything, like anything throughout life. It's how we react to the situation, and how we confront people. If we treat people the way we want to be treated, and you're working in a cooperative manner and not accusing people and pointing fingers, it goes pretty well. But if you're yelling and barking at them as soon as their feet hit the ground, you're going to get the same attitude in return. It really is a partnership. If you work together, everybody is out there trying to do the same job, because those utility owners, for the most part, have the same problems that we have, because they had to put it in the ground, so they know what it's like to be working with a shovel in their hands too. The responsiveness, I mean, obviously when their stuff is damaged, they're pretty responsive. The farther out you are, the more rural you are, the longer it may take for a response, just because there's miles in between where they're located and you're located. But for the most part, everybody tries to do a really good job. But I think we have the opportunity to set the tone. So if we take the lead and address it, even in a bad situation, in the most positive manner, we can create some partnerships. And the nice thing about that is, after the incident's over, you're going to have some phone numbers to call in the future, and that goes to that partnership thing that I just said. So that using those numbers in the future, those resources, will help prevent damage in the future. The timeliness on the repair or getting you back on the job, well, if you can make it hard on them, they're going to make it hard on you. And now, granted, there's sometimes where we think that they just wait around because, we wait 45 more minutes and drag our feet. It's overtime, but that's just, us being a little bit slighted, I guess, from the excavator side of the world. But at the end of the day, everybody's got a job to do, and if we treat each other with respect, I think.
So having said that, and I think this is a question as much for me as you might be able to assist in too. This is from one of our participants here. Experiencing getting certain large electric company in the area to respond during off hours has proven difficult. Is there anything that works to better access to the garage or dispatchers as opposed to going through customer service? I'll start, and then you can add in if you have something to add to that, depending on that facility owner, whoever it is. A lot of times you're dialing an 800 number, and it's specific extensions you're going to want to tap to get to the proper people. So I'll let Jonathan finish this out, but I would say if you go to illinoisoncall.com and look at About Us, or find the damage prevention managers on there, and send us a notice as to which company you might be having some difficulties with, we may be able to either get you coaching as to when you dial a number, what buttons do you push? You know, do you hit number 1? Do you hit number 4? Do you hit number 3? Whatever, to help you get through their internal phone switching a little quicker. And especially if it's an after hours issue, that's something that we would be more than happy to work on to get the member facility owners to provide a better process or a cleaner process, more knowledge out to that excavating community. If you're trying to do it right, we want to work with you to try to ensure that our members are doing it right as well. So, but this also goes back to some of the partnership issues you just mentioned, John, of having some numbers and contacts and things like that.
So what I would say to the person with the question there is get involved with your local damage prevention councils wherever you're at. I would hope I know it gets a little more difficult the farther south you get or the more rural you get in the state of Illinois, but getting involved with the damage prevention councils and learning who and meeting with, learning who the damage prevention departments are with the utilities you're dealing with, and having those phone numbers for their local field damage personnel so you can make that phone call to their cell phone right in the field where they're working. And I've had plenty of situations where I've said, look, I know this isn't your area, but can you guide me to whose area it is? And they immediately will tell you who it is, give you a phone number or text that number to you. And that to me is the best way to go about it. Now, granted, I know there's situations like you said, you got to call 811, you got to call the facility owner. But if you're doing damage prevention, like you think something might be out of place or might not be right, it's the perfect time to reach out and call those damage prevention managers for whatever utility you're dealing with. And they can get the ball rolling or get somebody out to you fairly quickly.
Right. And we're about out of time. Again, I want to thank you, Jonathan. One other thing I'd like to point out for those on the session with us today, Jonathan is also on the board of directors at Julie, representing the construction side of the world, the excavation side of the world. So he has some unique insights as to, you know, looking forward and moving on and all that. Now, having said that, Jonathan, if anybody were interested in getting with you to discuss anything and all that, would there be an issue if they were to email me or anything like that to provide them some contact information for you? And
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. If there's any way I can help somebody get involved or remove some barriers to improving performance moving forward, that's exactly what I want to do.
Right, right. And another thing to keep in mind, now we'll see how it goes next winter, but you know, there are multiple paradigm safety breakfasts throughout the state every January, February, March that myself and Roger Watwood in Southern Illinois and Brian McKenzie in Central Illinois for Julie, that we're the keynote speakers at typically. A lot of utility owners are there as well, and those are great opportunities to have face-to-face, ask questions, and do things like that. So there's opportunities there. So before we close out, Jonathan, any last best practices or ideas that in this realm of this, you know, damage issues and preventing them that you'd like to put out there?
The one thing that we didn't, when we were talking about actually investigating the damage that I didn't get to put a button on, is we also need some documentation. You have a form that captures, you know, where you were at, what you were doing, what type of facility you were working on, what was damaged, who the owner was, you know, the weather conditions that day, and then get a written statement from the folks that were there and have them sign it. And that is just a golden piece of paper at that point when you've got a statement with a signature and a date on it and a handwritten sketch or hand-drawn sketch. I mean, you've got all the photographs to back it up. But if the guy that was there actually operating the machine or the guy that was there on the shovel are given statements in support of what you're trying to say, it's just another bullet in the gun kind of way to put it, and it helps you. It may not make the entire thing go away, but you might be able to negotiate down to a pretty happy ending if you have that opportunity.
Excellent. And for those that are on still with us, we're getting ready to close out, but I do want to point out that next week we'll have Carl Parks as a guest speaker, and he is an investigator with the Illinois Commerce Commission. So over and above a damage issue itself, non-compliance with the act for a multitude of different functions could result in interaction with the Illinois Commerce Commission, reviewing whether somebody would receive a penalty or not from the commission. They do enforce the law. So they'll be our speakers next week. And I know that interaction and understanding their practices and everything else can also add to the conversation we had today. So Jonathan, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to be with us. Also coming June 11th, the person after that is going to be Mike Wiedmeyer, who's the executive director of the Underground Contractor Association of Illinois. So he'll be able to give us some insights on the construction industry today and moving forward and all that. So Jonathan, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
With that, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.